So, hello everyone and welcome, Jem. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight. Just a little bit of background to everyone that will be listening to this about Jem and about the webinar. Jem Shanap is a partner at Shanap & Co. And this is a company that is based in Istanbul, Turkey, and specializes in legal services, including but not limited to Residency and CBI, that is Citizenship by Investment, and corporate structuring services. The plan for today is that Jem talks about the opportunities in Turkey, particularly covering these two areas. So on the one side, he's going to present what structuring opportunities are available for new companies set up in Turkey, and some of the key incentives available that they can benefit from. And on the other hand, from an individual perspective, he's going to talk about the options of residency and relocation. So he will cover CBI, but not just that, other options for temporary and permanent residency as well. Jem, you can start whenever you want, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Denisa. Thank you. Also, thank you for the very brief and clear introduction. I will also introduce myself and our law firm in more detail, and then I will move on to the subjects that Denisa has recently referred to. Let me first start by sharing my screen. I believe right now it can be seen. Please, we will have a Q&A session at the end, so I will have any questions if you have any at the end of the presentation. Once again, my name is Jem Shanap, and I'm a partner at Shanap & Co. law firm. We're a law firm which is headquartered in Istanbul, but we also have offices in London and Paris. So this means that we are able to provide legal services not only with respect to Turkish law, but we are also able to provide legal services with respect to English law and French law as well. So this also means that we are able to provide services in Turkish, in English, and in French. We mostly service high-profile individual clients or corporate investors that have some sort of legal need in one of these markets. And we have been awarded 2 times by the European Bars Federation across whole Europe, respectively in 2019 and 2023, and we are the only law firm from Turkey to have received this award. Also, we own our legal technology company, which is a team of around 20 people, and thanks to this legal technology company, we have this sort of entrepreneurial and business mindset as well, which we incorporate into our practice, allowing us to have and provide 360-degree solutions both for local and foreign investors. You can here see our practice areas. We have a wide range of practice areas, such as corporate law, startup law, contracts law, migration law, real estate law, tax law, and foreign direct investments being some of these practice areas. And in any practice area that we are not directly specialized in, we have off-counsels on board where we can use their services to respond to your needs. And you can see our senior team here. And before we start, once again, let me highlight that none of the information provided in this presentation constitutes any legal, taxative, or financial advice, and you should still seek legal, taxative, or financial advice before taking any relevant action. So, as Denisa just briefly mentioned, today we're going to be discussing about multiple issues that relates to Turkish market and Turkey. In this respect, we are going to first talk about companies, and then we are going to move forward to individuals. As for the companies, we are going to mention a couple of subjects. First, we are going to talk about the corporate structures in Turkey and any incentives and exemptions provided for the companies to be established in Turkey, if you have any such desires or plans for the future. And then we are going to move forward to issues that surround individuals, which mostly are focused on relocating to Turkey or acquiring a Turkish citizenship. First of all, there are various company types in Turkey, but the most common company types in Turkey are joint stock companies and limited liability companies. The rules that are surrounding these two types of companies are not perfectly identical to limited liability companies in the UK or in the US, but they are mostly the same in the sense that they provide limited liability to the shareholders, so on and so forth. And as for the capital requirements, subscription requirement for these companies, the joint stock company requires a minimum amount of 250 Turkish liras capital subscription, which roughly translates to 7,000 US dollars, and you only need to pay 25% of this capital upfront, and you can pay the outstanding amount in 2 years after incorporation. So this means that you only need to pay $1,400 upon incorporation, and you can pay the subscribe the remaining capital amount in a 2 years time. And as for the limited liability companies, the capital subscription, minimum capital subscription is 50,000 liras, which converts to $1,400, and this amount is not doesn't have to be paid upfront. You can pay this amount again in 2 years time, the full amount. And then, as I told earlier, there are other types of companies as well, but these types of companies are not preferred neither by Turkish investors nor by foreign investors. So, if in any way you are planning to make any corporate investments in Turkey and a foreign direct investment in Turkey, the Turkish legislation provides a series of advantages that you can benefit from. And these advantages come in various forms, which you may see here. They are categorized into 4 different categories. The first one covers all foreign direct investments, although of course there are specific rules. That you should take into consideration while making these investments. But the first category of incentives covers VAT exemption, which is 20% in Turkey right now for most categories of products, for any machinery that you are gonna buy, acquire, and customs duty exemption, again, on any machinery that you are going to import from abroad. As for other kinds of investment incentives, these depend on, for instance, the region that you are going to make the investments. For instance, in Turkey, under this scheme, the whole country is divided into various regions, and certain regions are prioritized over others. For instance, if you make an investment in Turkey, in Istanbul, then you will not, for instance, benefit from this second category of incentives, which are called the regional investment incentives. These are mostly targeted for areas that are more underdeveloped, or at least, let's say, developed at a relatively lower level when compared to all the cosmopolitan areas and so forth. But if you have any intention to invest in these areas, you can again benefit from various incentives such as VAT exemption, customs duty exemptions, land allocation, free land allocation, or at least a land allocation that is subsidized to a very significant degree, interest rate support when receiving loans from Turkish banks, also coverage of social security premiums of the employees, which is a very significant amount, and certain exemption from income tax as well. Also, you can invest in certain strategic areas that are, let's say, promoted by the government, and if you invest in some of those areas, this can be, let's say, car manufacturing, certain technological areas, so on and so forth. You also benefit from various incentives, again, such as you can see here, VAT exemption, again, land allocation, and interest rate support. And there are also certain project-based investment incentives. These are mostly for relatively large-sized investors, so to say, and these are generally carried out through negotiations with the government. And if such a case take place, then you would also benefit from some additional types of incentives, such as energy support or subsidization by the government, even capital contribution support by the government. The government would cover some of the capital that would be invested into the company, and various facilitation of various permits and licenses that you are required to receive based on the investment that you are going to take. For instance, let's say if it's a mining investment, if it's a finance investment, these areas require certain types of licenses, permits. These processes can be facilitated by the government based on the amount of investment that you are willing to make in Turkey. However, the incentives are not limited to these areas, and to be frank, the amount of investment that you need to make in Turkey under these categories are relatively higher. But if you have a relatively lower budget, but if you are more tech oriented or if you are a startup, so to say, you can still benefit from a variety of incentives and tax exemptions in Turkey. In Turkey, there are very special zones dedicated to tech companies, R&D companies, and startups. These are either R&D centers and technoparks, as I will briefly mention in a moment. If you are located in any of these R&D centers, your R&D and design expenditures become wholly deductible from your corporate tax base. So you don't pay any corporate tax if you make any expenses on R&D and design. Also, your employees will be exempt from income tax, and I will be briefly mentioning about the income tax rates in Turkey in the later slides, but this means that you will not pay any income tax for your employees, which is technically your burden as the employer. Also, your the social security premiums of your workers will be partially covered by the government, so you will also not be paying any social security premiums. And again, if you intend to import any machinery or equipment from abroad, you again become exempted from the customs duty. Technoparks provide a higher degree of advantages when compared to R&D centers, but also these are the centers that are much harder to enter, to be honest. Our legal tech company, for instance, is located in one of these technoparks in Turkey. There are currently right now more than 100 technoparks scattered all around Turkey. And we are highly familiar with the entry and exit processes of these technoparks. And should you have any such needs, we can also help with the relocation to a Turkish technopark in Turkey. Once you enter a technopark, like as the bottom line, you pretty much pay no taxes, so to say, on your company operations. For instance, you become fully exempt from your corporate tax of 25%. Your employees become exempt from income tax. Again, you also become exempt from paying social security premiums for your workers, at least partial exemption here as well. If you produce and sell any software services, you do not pay any VAT on these services as well, which puts it at a very significant competitive advantage against your competitors within Turkey and abroad. Also, if you import any machinery, just as in the other categories of incentives, you do not pay any customs duties on these machineries and equipments. Also, these technoparks are very well decorated and large hubs. Generally, you receive free or very discounted rents while located in these technoparks. And in these technoparks, you can have access to in-house experts and mentors from different fields where you can benefit from which you can benefit for free. For instance, here you can see the various pictures of technoparks. They come in all sizes. So the one on the right is one of the largest technoparks in Turkey, where we are located as well. And that one is in Istanbul. The one on the right, at the bottom right side, is located in Antalya. It's one of the relatively small technoparks, but it is still preferred a lot by foreign investors as they want to live in Antalya over Istanbul in certain cases if they like beaches, resorts, better weather, so to say, in general. And as you can see, the offices are generally fully furnished and are able to accommodate the whole needs of yourself and your team as well. So in Turkey, there are also incentives for export companies, especially the government highly encourages exporting products and services to abroad. So you can also find a variety of incentives and exemptions for these type of companies. You can see, as you may see, some of the issues are common with the other exemptions and incentives as we covered before, but there are also certain unique exemptions and incentives under this category. For instance, as an export company, if you are planning to attend to fairs abroad, the government subsidizes your participation in these fairs up to 25% of these costs. There is also subsidization for certain categories of expenditures, such as promotion and advertisement costs, store rents, especially store rents abroad, and counseling expenses that you would require to pay when you're opening to a new market abroad. Also, there are certain very specific incentives for e-export companies as well, and all the other exemptions, as you can see, are pretty much similar to the ones that we have covered so far. Also, if you enter in any of the free zones in Turkey, this also means that you are going to also be exempt from special consumption tax and corporate tax as well. So, if you are to cover the taxation in Turkey, First, we should mention the income tax rates in Turkey. Well, the income tax rates in Turkey are let's say divided into various levels based on how much money you are making. Until 32,000 liras per year, you are only paid 15%, but to be frank, 32,000 liras means pretty much nothing. It's less than $1,000 per year. So as your income is increased, you are taxed as per the bracket that you are found in. This doesn't mean that if you are making more than, let's say here, 1 million Turkish liras, you are directly taxed 40%. It doesn't mean that. First, you are based as per the above brackets, and for any income that is above 880,000 Turkish liras, you are taxed 40% per year. As for the corporate tax, it's a flat 25%. It's high when compared to many of the adjacent countries in the region. But as I told earlier, most foreign investors benefit from some of the incentives or exemptions that I provided earlier. So this is generally the rule that applies to local company owners and shareholders. Turkey is also party to countless double taxation treaties with various confidently say that majority of the people found in this presentation are from countries from which Turkey has a double taxation treaty with. Maybe one thing you should know here is that Turkey is a party to information transfer agreements with various countries. This means that if the country requires certain information regarding the financial background of the individual, Turkey is under the obligation to disclose this information, and this can also mean in certain cases disclosure of bank account movements. But once again, let me highlight that this treaty is present in most other major countries as well. So let's move on to the individual aspects of this presentation, so to say. Now we are going to first start by telling you about the residence permit process in Turkey, in case you are planning to relocate to Turkey as a foreigner and want to continue at least some part of your life here in Turkey. While in Turkey, the applications are made to immigration office online, so you don't have to make any physical application to anywhere, at least at the initial stage of the application. But once the application is filed, there is a face-to-face interview. And let me highlight that while the applications are made online, you should still be present in Turkey. So you cannot make a residence permit application outside Turkey if you want to receive a residence permit in Turkey. But once the residence face-to-face interviews are carried out, you have to provide various documents, as you may see here, which covers your passport, various photos, any proof of financial eligibility, so on and so forth. If you already provide and collect all these documents and draft all the necessary documents on your behalf and make the applications on your behalf, but you still should be physically present at the immigration office at the time of the interview. And the residence permits, these short-term residence permits, can be given up to 2 years, but to be honest, in the recent year, especially in the last 1 or 2 years, these durations are reduced as low as short as 6 months. So this means that you need to renew your residence permit at the end of 6 months if you want to continue to live in Turkey. In the past, this used to be, at least in most of the cases, 1 year. So there are various application expenses. These are mostly negligible, so to say. Maybe let me give it as a rule of thumb that right now $1 equals to around 35 Turkish liras. So here the amounts, as you can see here, makes $100, less than $100 to $150, let's say. And the entire process, once we file the application, is concluded in 90 days. Also, if you want to somehow work in Turkey, there is also a process that should be carried out to receive the working permit. And unlike residence permits, for working permits, the application doesn't have to be made only within Turkey. You can also make an application for a working permit abroad. Especially if this is the first time you are going to apply for a working permit, you should in fact be located outside Turkey and make the application to a foreign consulate. And again, the application process, unlike the resident permit, should be carried out in collaboration with your employer, with your, let's say, potential employer. Here also there are various documents to be provided, such as diploma, equivalency certificate, residence permit as well, if there is one, and labor contract, among others. But here, the issue that you should be aware is that in order to receive a working permit in Turkey as a shareholder, so you can also receive a working permit as a shareholder of a company in Turkey, there are various criteria that you should be complying with. First of all, if the company has already been incorporated for more than a year ago, for instance, it must have made around more than at least 8 million Turkish liras in gross sales revenue. So this roughly makes, let's say, $200,000, $250,000 as an annual gross sales revenue in the last year. However, if the company is just newly incorporated and you want to receive a working permit, this means that your capital contribution in the company should at least be 500,000 Turkish liras. So this also converts to around, this is 15,000 US dollars. Also, one thing you should know as a foreigner who would like to receive a working permit in Turkey, for every one foreigner in the company, for foreign citizens in the company, there should be 5 Turkish citizens employed within the company. There are certain exemptions to this rule and exceptions to this rule, so to say. For instance, if you are located in a technopark in one of the centers that I mentioned earlier, you can get around this rule, but as a very basic and principal rule of thumb, there should be 5 Turkish employees for any foreign employee to be employed in the company. This also covers the shareholder. But I should also highlight that this rule, when you are the shareholder, is taken into account only after 6 months. So not immediately, but by the end of the 6 months, you should have hired 5 Turkish personnel in the company. And also, all these Turkish personnel and all these, if you are going to hire foreigners in the company, these foreigners should receive incomes that are suitable to their job. If you are employing an engineer, a foreign engineer, that engineer should be having a
Jem.
And the expenses in this process again are relatively insignificant. So they are from $200 to $1,000. Also, if you do not comply with working permit regulations in Turkey, there are various penalties per month that is not complied with working permit and per person. So if you have employed foreign personnel in your company, or if you are illegally employed in a company in Turkey, this means that you have to pay $300 to $1,000, $400 to $1,000 per month for every month and for every employee working in that company. However, recently there is a new type of visa introduced in Turkey. This is very.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just so you know, we no longer see your screen. I think you dropped for a little bit, and now we can.
Sorry. Let me reshare it. I wasn't aware. Thank you for the heads up.
Worries.
And do you remember where you lost me?
It was just for a little bit. So we kind of we heard everything you mentioned about the working permit. So no problem. You can carry on.
Okay,
just that you lost your screen. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And very recently, the government has introduced a new type of regime to, let's say, bring foreigners into Turkey, and this is the tech visa. This, as I told her, this is very recent. It's just a few months old. And as per this program, you can now receive a 3-year long permit if you have a technology company or a startup abroad. This program, as a general rule, is introduced to attract foreign companies and allow them to move their companies and their entire team, into Turkey as a whole. So under this program, both the founders and the employers can benefit from a 3-year long work permit. And if you are part of this program, you are also relocated to one of the technoparks in Turkey. So this also means that you directly benefit from any of the benefits that I mentioned specific to technoparks, which are like exemption from corporate tax, exemption from income tax, so on and so forth. Also, if you come to Turkey through this program, this means that you can also benefit from the financing offered by the Tech Visa Fund, which is specifically designed for this program. And both yourself and your employees are able to benefit from the free healthcare provided under this program. And how does the process go? You make an application for Okay. Denise, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I lost you when you were talking about the free healthcare and the application,
Okay.
the process for.
But can you see my screen still?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this also means that both the founders and the employees are able to benefit from the free healthcare. And how does the process go? Well, you first make an application for tech visa abroad while you are still abroad. And if you are admitted to the program, let's say it's a preliminary admittance, you receive a 3 months long work permit for the founders. And the founders are expected to relocate to Turkey and start a company within 30 days of relocation and make a second application for the 3-year long work permit. And once it is granted, all the employees and the founders are to start benefiting from this 3 years long work permit. And if the company operates as per the laws and regulations, this 3-year long work permit is let's say extended, and eventually you can even benefit from Turkish citizenship, as I will tell briefly in a moment now. So in Turkish, there are various means of acquiring Turkish citizenship. The first way of receiving Turkish citizenship is through the passage of time, and the second one is through making an investment in Turkey. So if you want to acquire Turkish citizenship through the passage of time, you should either be a resident of Turkey continuously for at least 5 years. This also covers working in Turkey for 5 years, for instance, under this program, or you should be married to a Turkish citizen for at least 3 years. Other than that, you can acquire Turkish citizenship by making an investment in Turkey. But maybe I should also highlight one more issue. If you want to acquire Turkish citizenship through the passage of time, the process is relatively longer, not only because of those 5 or 3 years, but also once that 5 or 3 years is expired as well. So once you make an application for citizenship after 5 years, that application process as well takes maybe 1 or even 2 years, depending on the circumstances. But the application to citizenship through investment is a very expedited process. With our clients, we have been able to acquire citizenship, let's say, in less than 3 to 4 months. Although this process, of course, can take up to 1 year in exceptional circumstances. So how can you acquire citizenship through investments in Turkey? There are various means of managing this process, but in all cases, you have to make a relatively significant amount of investment in Turkey, and the thresholds depend on the type of investment that you are going to be making. For instance, you can make an investment of $500,000 as capital to a company that you are going to incorporate in Turkey. So you can manage this program with other programs as well. Let's say you can both benefit from Turkish citizenship by incorporating a company in Turkey by investing $500,000. So this would give you a Turkish citizenship, and then you can also benefit from other various incentives that I mentioned earlier under foreign direct investments. Or you can buy a real estate in Turkey that values at least $400,000. This is one of the most commonly preferred way of making an investment in Turkey, because you can then sell that property 3 years later, 3 years after the acquisition. You just only need to hold on to that property for 3 years, and you can, of course, live in that property yourself, or you can rent out that property and accrue rent income. Or you can incorporate a company in Turkey and employ 50 people in Turkey. That will also allow you to apply for Turkish citizenship. You can deposit at least $500,000 at a bank in Turkey for a term of at least, again, 3 years. But let me highlight that this amount will be converted into Turkish lira. So you are not able to deposit this amount in US dollar or in euro, so on and so forth. But maybe I should make another point at this stage. So in Turkey right now, there is a relatively high inflation. And because of this reason, the interest rates are very, very high right now. I don't know if this would stay continuously this way for 3 more years, but in the last year, I can say that the interest rate income, when compared to, let's say, investing your money in a deposit account in US dollar or euro, was much higher. So investing your money in Turkish lira brought much more yield when compared to investing your money in US dollar or in euro, not only in deposits in Turkey, but also in most deposits in US or in Europe as well. Also, you can buy government bills, bonds, etc. With, again, a valuation of at least 5,000 Turkish lira, 500,000 US dollars. This again would mean that you would make an investment in Turkish lira, so it's because you need to convert that sum into Turkish lira. Also, you can invest $500,000 US dollars in a real estate fund or a venture capital fund for, again, at least for a term of 3 years. This is also a method that is preferred by some investors, because if you make your investment, let's say in some of the good venture capital funds or real estate funds, they also provide very good yields. So when we look at the market right now, the most commonly preferred ways of making an investment in Turkey and acquiring Turkish citizenship is capital to a company, if especially you want to benefit from those other incentives that I mentioned earlier, buying real estate, and finally investing into a real estate fund or a venture capital fund. So actually that pretty much sums up all the issues that I was planning to cover in this presentation. Here you can find our company website. You can review the backgrounds of our team in more detail. And here also you can find my personal email address, corporate email address. You can also feel free to always reach out and ask any questions directly to us. Please also feel free to add me on LinkedIn if you have one and if you want to. Right now I can have any questions if you have any.
Thanks a lot, Cem. Everyone, if you have questions, please unmute yourselves and go ahead, shoot them, or you can type them in the chat.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hello.
I mean, buying real estate to get citizenship. I mean, anywhere in Turkey. So you can buy literally anything in Turkey, like real estate, a flat in Bodrum. It's okay.
Yes, it's okay. So there are certain exceptions to this rule, of course, but as a rule of thumb, yes. There are certain, let's say, districts, not cities, but certain districts within certain cities that you cannot buy that real estate in order to acquire citizenship. But they are very low in number, so like there are very small exceptions, so to say. Also, you have to buy that real estate not from a person who was previously foreigner. You have to buy that real estate from a originally Turkish citizen. Other than that, all the other rules and regulations, let's say, just like do not prevent you from acquiring Turkish citizenship. So yes, as a rule of thumb, it covers all the cities in Turkey.
Okay. And the other thing that I think someone mentioned once was that if you become a citizen of Turkey, however, you're up for military service, right? Because of war.
So this depends on how old you are. So if you are, I need to double check that number, but if you are 35 or older, you're not under any obligation to serve in the military. And if you are younger, this again boils down to where you live. So if you are going to mostly live in Turkey and younger than 35 years, then there are certain circumstances where you would be expected to serve in the military. But again, there are specific circumstances where you are expected and specific circumstances where you are not. This depends on your personal case, actually.
Okay. And speaking Turkish is not a requirement to be a citizen of Turkey?
No. If you want to acquire Turkish citizenship through making an investment, you are not expected. If you are planning to acquire Turkish citizenship through the passage of time, you are expected to learn at least a degree of Turkish. But even in that case, that's the expectation is not very high, so to say.
Okay. So there's no exam, is what I mean.
No,
yeah.
There is no exam. It's for the acquisition of Turkish citizenship, let's say naturalization through investment. There is no exam at all. There is no interview at all. Actually, once we acquire or draft the necessary documents, we carry out the entire entire application. You're not even expected to be in Turkey in that process if you have made an investment. As for the other means, naturalization through the passage of time, so to say, in that case, there's an interview process which is carried out in Turkish, and the questions may vary, but even in that case, you're not expected to speak fully fluent Turkish. However, in that process, you're expected to stay in Turkey through the application process as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Ted
All
is
right.
asking.
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Ted is asking that he's heard that you can deposit 500,000 US as gold in a bank instead of currency. Is this true?
No, unless there's something very new which missed our attention. No, you have to convert that to Turkish lira, and the government wants to see the conversion documents during the application. We can still double check that in case we missed a very recent change in the law. But if there was such a change, I would know it. But still, if you like, Denisa, we can double check that again and share the most up-to-date information with the audience.
Okay, with regard...
Sorry, Denisa, or the person who asked this question can reach out to me through this email address and ask it directly to me, and I would be very happy to check that once again and get back to you.
Absolutely. When it comes to owning real estate, so you mentioned that you can you are only obliged to hold it for 3 years and then you can sell
Yes.
it. How
Yes.
easy is it for a foreigner to divest a real estate asset in Turkey? Is it a straightforward process? Is it a liquid enough market? Because they cannot sell it to another foreigner doing the same thing. So.
Yes, very good question. The real estate market in Turkey is very active. It's like it's beyond expectations. Especially depends on which city you have your investments in. If you have your investment in some of the central areas, such as central cities such as Istanbul, Ankara, Bodrum, Izmir, Antalya, these are the most central areas that are also preferred by foreigners as well. So if you have an investment in one of those areas, you would very easily sell that property regardless of how much it costs. Even if it's $1 million, multi-million-dollar property, of course this would take a relatively longer period of time, but you could still sell it at a relatively short period. And if the property is valued, let's say only $400,000 or $500,000, the process would take even shorter. You would easily sell it in 1 or 2 months. And the process is very streamlined. We guide the sales process on your behalf. You don't even have to come to Turkey if you want us to, of course, represent you. So we carry out the sales deed. We ensure that the money is transferred safely to your accounts. And once they are transferred to your accounts, we also, if you need us to do, of course, we also make sure that those funds are transferred to your accounts abroad, which also requires such a service.
Great.
And one more issue. Also scouting the market for potential buyers. We have an off-council realtor. We can even say that this is an in-house realtor who actively looks for potential clients and leads in the market and eventually gets in contact with them should you request them.
Adam, would you like to ask anything else?
Sure. Just sorry about this process of applying for citizenship in very more sequential terms. So you come to Turkey, you identify a property, you say, I want to buy this. Do you have to complete the transaction, own the asset first, pay the money, get the apartment or whatever it is, and then apply for citizenship? Or can you sort of say, I'm going to buy this, can I have citizenship?
No.
Do you see what I mean? Do you have to do the real estate first?
So there is no kind of a preliminary approval process. You first need to buy the property and then apply for the citizenship. You cannot just, let's say, start the process and then buy the property to make sure that that process is started. But so to say, if all the documents are duly done and if all the necessary regulations and rules are followed while buying the property and all the necessary documentation is collected, so to say, all in all, the granting of the citizenship is pretty much guaranteed. So there is no exception to that. So there is not a case of not being able to receive Turkish citizenship once all the steps and procedures are followed duly. So it is enough that your property is valued, and this valuation doesn't mean the amount you bought the property. This means the appraisal made by an objective third-party appraiser that is, let's say, licensed by the government. So if that appraiser appraises the property to value for more than $400,000, and you have collected the necessary documentation and made the necessary application, this means that you are pretty much guaranteed your citizenship by the end of, let's say, 4 months to 6 months on average.
So
okay, and I mean, sorry, go on. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, and broadly, without wishing to pin you down, because obviously you're a law firm, but I mean, how much does it cost? The process, not the property.
So the application fees. Okay, let me put it this way. In general, again, yeah, everything included. I'm gonna give you a fee, everything included. This will be including the legal fees, realtor fees, application fees, appraiser fees, everything. Translation fees, notarization fees, everything. Generally, what we advise to our clients, this again depends on the amount of the property that is going to be purchased, but to expect, let's say, 6 to 10%, let's say, margin for such expenses on the property value. So if the property is valued, let's say, $500,000, then you should expect $30,000 to $50,000 of expenses going for all these issues.
Okay, and then a final one, I promise, is
no, please.
Citizen,
I'm not bothered by any of the questions. I would be very happy to hear them.
Yeah, once you become a Turkish citizen, do you have to register with the tax authorities and fill in tax returns every year and all this sort of thing?
Okay, so technically, once you're a Turkish citizenship, you're already an, let's say, tax obligant. But this doesn't mean that you have to pay taxes in Turkey. So there are already double tax treaties in Turkey. So if you're already paying taxes in another country where Turkey already has a double tax treaty, then it is enough that you're already taxed in that country. Also, as a rule of thumb, in Turkey, you are taxed for the income you make in Turkey. So you are not, again, as a rule of thumb, under an obligation to pay any income that you make in another country. Again, this is just a rule of thumb. There are, of course, exceptions that apply to this rule. But if, for instance, as for that asset you have in Turkey, if you make any rent income from that asset, because most of our clients prefer not to live in that asset and just rent it out to potential tenants, you will be making certain rent income. You only get paid on that income that you receive from that tax, from that property. But maybe I should also highlight that what happens in practice is that in the first 5 years, in the first 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, the owner pretty much doesn't pay any income tax on that property as well, because you can deduct 5% of the purchase value as a, let's say, startup cost for your potential income, for your potential income. So that sets off any income that you would receive from that property. So you pretty much pay either no tax for the first 5 years, or at least start paying some very limited amount of income tax towards the third, fourth, or fifth year after acquisition of the property.
Sorry, do family members eventually acquire any right? Your wife,
very good question. Children? Of course. Sorry that I missed to tell about that. So your wife and your children under 18 also benefit from citizenship once you make an investment in Turkey. So they are also covered under the investment scheme as well, under the citizenship and investment scheme as well. Okay. And you don't have to, of course, buy a separate property for all of them. You just only need to make a single investment of like exceeding the thresholds. So they will all be covered under that scheme.
Very good. Okay. Okay. I think that's all from me. Thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. You are currently viewing my email address on the I think.
Yes,
right.
I have your email.
Also, feel free to reach out later on as well.
You are in Istanbul.
Yes, I'm currently in Istanbul. One of my partners is located in London, and the other one is in Paris. but we are in Istanbul. Please also feel free to come and pay a visit in person as well.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Well, I wanted to ask you, when you mentioned about residency, that you have to renew it almost every 6 months, does it mean that you are liable to fill out taxes as well if you're staying more than 6 months? I suppose you're paying taxes on, but only on your territorial income or on your global income?
Yes, only on your territorial income again as well. So in those 6 months, if you are not making any income in Turkey, in principle, you don't have to pay any taxes. And let me highlight that in general, the government is not always very good, let's say, expert at determining the tax obligations of most people, unless you are really evading very significant amount of your tax obligations. It is generally very common that people can at least get away with not paying certain amount of tax. Of course, this may change in the future, but this is what is the case for the moment. But going back to your question, so of course you need to renew your residence permits every 6 months, but you still only have to pay taxes in Turkey with respect to any income that you make in Turkey. But of course, if you bring any, let's say, income from abroad to Turkey, which is not taxed in that country, then the case may change.
Great. Adam.
Sorry, please, everyone else step in front of me, but I just keep remembering things I meant to ask. Is crypto legal now? Illegal? What do they think of it? And how sort of vicious is the system against it, or they don't care and they don't really do anything?
Okay, this is also another good question. So the use of crypto, transfers of crypto is very common in Turkey right now. There are already, you can also use like international crypto markets to trade and transfer your crypto assets or currencies, or you can do it the same with using the local service providers as well. The issue was not regulated until very recently. Last year, a new law was introduced, which imposes certain duties on the service providers to, let's say, disclose and share certain information with the government in certain circumstances. So, especially if the amount is not too high, not significantly high, you wouldn't face any sanction or problem in general. But again, exceptions do apply. So sometimes the government may inquire about the source of the crypto funds, especially if they come from abroad. But again, so this is determined on a case-by-case basis, especially if somehow that person already is being suspected of certain criminal activities and is connected with certain crypto asset transfers that are somehow connected to abroad, or certain, let's say, fraudulent accounts within Turkey as well. Again, I'm just speculating here. Then this may work against you. But if you are going to transfer certain funds on specific occasions, and these funds being not very significant amounts, you wouldn't face any problems.
Anyone else?
Maybe let me highlight that while making those investments in Turkey, we generally advise our clients not to bring those money to Turkey through cryptocurrencies, but rather through banks, because it provides a relatively more clear chain of transactions, which would help us during our application for citizenship.
All right, Adam, is that clear, or do you have a follow-up question? Okay, I guess that's clear. I wanted to ask you, Jem, you mentioned that you can invest in a real estate fund or a VC fund, $500,000, and you can apply for citizenship. Is there, for how long do you have to lock in that investment? Is there
again? It's for 3 years. So as a rule of thumb, in Turkey, if you want to, say for employing at least 50 people in Turkey, as a rule of thumb, all your investments should be locked in, as you say, for 3 years once you make that investment. So after the 3 year expires, you are free to make whatever you like with that investment.
And is any restriction regarding the ownership of that real estate fund? So, for example, if a foreign organization wants to set up a real estate fund in Turkey and then sell out this package with citizenship, like real estate, part of the real estate fund plus citizenship to people, are there any restrictions?
Yes. So, of course, there are certain rules that are implemented to prevent certain collusive activities. The ownership of the real estate fund by itself, by a foreigner, would not hinder you from being able to apply for citizenship, but that would be taken into consideration along with other factors in case there are some collusive transactions that are taking place to carry out some fraudulent activities, so to say.
So it doesn't help that if the ownership is fully foreign help, it would help if you had a local partner to have a VC fund, for example, doing the same activity. Do I understand correctly?
Can you repeat that question, Denisa, please?
So it doesn't help if you have a real estate owned fund that is purely owned by foreign shareholders, non-Turkish. It would help if you had a Turkish partner as part of the ownership of that fund in order to easily sell this product package, let's say. Do I understand this correctly?
Okay, maybe let me highlight or maybe rephrase what I mean by investing into a real estate fund and respond to your question accordingly, because I may have misconveyed myself. So here, you don't have to be the founder or let's say official shareholder of like partner of a real estate fund company, not the very company itself. You just only need to make an investment in the fund. So this is regardless of who owns that real estate fund. So you don't have to establish a company which will then own a real estate fund. You are just going to go and invest in some of the real estate funds or venture capital funds that are currently active and incorporated in Turkey.
That's clear. I was thinking from the perspective of if Mavericks were to set up a fund in real estate fund in Turkey and go back to the members and say, look, we have this real estate fund in Turkey. You have the option to invest $500,000 for 3 years. You benefit from all the yields that come with the real estate fund ownership, but it is owned and operated by Mavericks, right? And it would be foreign owned. That was the idea.
Okay. Yes, that would in principle not prevent the potential investors from acquiring Turkish citizenship. Again, exceptions do apply to that as well. We would still need to check the law to make sure, but that would not prevent investors from acquiring Turkish citizenship because the company will still be incorporated in Turkey, even if it's owned by foreigners.
Okay, that's an interesting path. What is the tax when you sell a real estate property in Turkey?
Perfect. So this again depends on when you sell the property. So in this case, you are gonna not be able to sell the property within 3 years, but if you still sell it within 5 years, there is going to be a capital gains tax, and that tax will be subject to these let's say brackets. But there should be one thing that I should highlight with respect to sales and purchases when it comes to real estate in Turkey. So there is this very common practice of not declaring the actual sales value when buying or selling the property. So this means that we cannot do it when we buy the property because we are going to apply for citizenship, but we can do it once we decide to sell the property. So this means that even if you sell the property, let's say for $600,000, you can still technically declare. Of course, this is not by the law, this is not legal, but it's a very common practice. Let's say 90% of the market already does this, unless there's a new rule or regulation that comes into force. So you can sell that property for $600,000, but you can still declare it only to be, let's say, $400,000, which would redeem you of your capital gains tax obligation. You would get around that obligation, and this is again very common in the market. most people, especially if they are buying and selling properties in very short durations, follow this rule. Otherwise, you will have to pay these brackets. Of course, this will be adjusted by the inflation, but still, this is the main rule of thumb when it comes to paying capital gains tax on the property bought and sold within 5 years.
So to be clear, if I buy the property now at 400,000 and I sell it at 500,000, I will pay the taxes for the difference between like for 100,000, which is the gain that I paid over this.
For the 100,000, of course, converted to Turkish lira, this would be calculated in Turkish lira terms.
And if it's lower, if I sell it for declared 3,000, then there is no tax paid.
There is no tax paid. You only pay the taxes that are related to sales, which is 2% on the declared amount.
Clear. All right. Adam.
Sorry, again, but I sort of read somewhere, vaguely remember, that if you apply for citizenship, you sort of get a Turkish name. Have I got that right? That your name is slightly different?
Okay, if you want to, you can. You're not under any obligation to get a Turkish name, unless your current name has certain non-Turkish characters, such as X, W, or Q. So if you have any of these letters, or any, let's say, country-specific, language-specific letters that are not currently in Turkish alphabet, then those letters would have to be converted to Turkish letters. For instance, let's say your name is Oksana, let's say, with an X, then that would be, if you want to convert into O, K, S, A, and A. Or you can prefer to adopt a totally different name. Even if your name is Oksana, you can adopt a Turkish name such as, let's say, Elif or Ayşe, for instance. That depends on you. But you're not under any obligation to change that name.
I understand, but you can if you want to.
You can if you want to, yes.
Wow. Interesting. Okay, and another question, which is another slightly different issue, is the import and export of gold bullion still like free without monitoring? Because before, I believe gold bullion, for example, goes between Istanbul and Dubai quite frequently. Is it still like that, or is it now stopped that?
By export and import, do you mean like carrying those gold bullions with yourself when you're flying to Dubai?
Yes, that is what I mean. Yes.
So, okay, in Turkey, there is this general principle of declaring any amount above $10,000 to authority, to customs authorities, when you are bringing those let's say currencies to abroad. If I'm not mistaken, I would have to double check that again, to be honest. If I'm not mistaken, that also covers gold bullions, unless those golds are like in the forms of jewelries, bracelets, so on and so forth. That wouldn't fall under that. But the bullions itself would fall under the scope of this regulation. So anything above $10,000 would have to be declared. But again, if you reach out to us, I can double check that again and get back to you. This is not something that I know from my heart, to be honest.
Okay. Great. Thanks again. Thank you for everything.
My pleasure.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, we are close to the top of the hour. Actually, it's 8 p.m., so kind of ran out of time as well. For anyone listening to this, if they have questions, they can reach out to Jem directly. Thank you very much, Jem, for putting in the time to do this. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure. It's my pleasure. Maybe I can also share my personal phone number here in case anyone wants to reach out that wasn't in the presentation. So feel free to reach out to WhatsApp or Telegram, whichever you prefer, and we would be very happy to help with any of your legal needs in Turkey.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening or day or afternoon.